How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Back here today on a Monday, January 27th. Now, we finally know who the two teams will be representing each conference in the Super Bowl. We got the Chiefs representing the AFC and the Eagles coming out of the NFC. The matchup that we weren't necessarily too excited for, but it's the one that I think was the most obvious to happen. So, with that being the case, we're going to go into this past Sunday, yesterday, and talk about the games, reviewing them, and just giving our thoughts on what we saw from each of the conference games. Also, we're going to be bringing up some more coaching news around the NFL. Brian Schottenheimer obviously being named the Cowboys head coach. We'll talk about that, and also some head coaching news elsewhere, as well as bringing up the Steelers and their progression with Russell Wilson and just that entire quarterback situation in general with their owner, talking a little bit more today as well. So all of that stuff is coming up on today's show, and before we get started, a typical reminder for you guys, if you guys want to get involved with the show with any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to do so, because your input, insight always provides us with a lot at the start, but also, just gives a different perspective on anything we're talking about, and it's interesting to know what you guys are also thinking. So whether it's, again, a question, opinion, or just any comment, if you want to make it absolutely sure that it stands out and gets featured on any of the shows, there's an easy way to do that just by using the Super Chat feature. Click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets seen by me. I'll read it out loud. It gets featured on the show. And that way, we're able to carry the conversation potentially in a different direction. And we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love. And we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, get involved with the show, use the Super Chat feature, and click the $ and just let us know what's on your mind whenever you guys are able and are wanting to ask a question or anything like that. So, with that being the case, we're going to start off with, I would say the biggest piece of news in regards to head coaching around the NFL. A lot of news has been coming out over the last few days, whether it be Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, being hired to their respective jobs. Liam Cohen, another one that got pretty crazy towards the end of last week as well. But on that topic, on the end of last week, that was when we officially got the news, I believe after we went off the air on this show, that Brian Schottenheimer, the former offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, was being promoted and hired as their new head coach. And actually today, the Cowboys held the introductory press conference for Brian Schottenheimer, and I don't have any quotes or anything like that because this is still the initial stage of it, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it more throughout the week. But the Brian Schottenheimer era started today, right? Today officially was the start of this, and I'm sure he went into, the overview and everything like that of the position, where the Cowboys are right now, and all the sort of good stuff, right? And, this was something that really picked up steam at the end of last week, where I wanted to believe it, or actually that's a lie. I didn't want to believe it because I wasn't a big fan of this move, but it felt like a lot of reports, a lot of sources were pretty adamant that this was going to get done sooner rather than later, and lo and behold, it was to the end of the week that we saw this officially become, cemented as a real, as a reality, as an actual possibility. So, Dallas, didn't really venture too far after they parted with Mike McCarthy. And, it was said that Jerry and Mike McCarthy couldn't agree on a length of a potential new deal. Their search really didn't go that far, other than a lot of close relationships with Jerry Jones and the organization. You talk about Robert Saleh, Leslie Frazier, Kellen Moore, Dion, all these guys. Pretty close relationship with Jerry Jones. So, and also Brian Schottenheimer, obviously, who was already there. So, a lot of guys that aren't really so much of a reach, aren't really so much of a risk for the Dallas Cowboys. So they kept it pretty close. And at the end of the day, they just promoted from within. And if you aren't aware, Brian Schottenheimer has been involved with the NFL mostly all of his life. He's the son of the late Marty Schottenheimer. And, it goes back to he's been, really involved and really been in a position like this in 2018 and 2020 when he was calling plays back then for the Seattle Seahawks. But since then, he really hasn't been in that role. And once he was brought in by Dallas in 2022 to be their offensive coordinator, even still, he was not calling plays for them. It was still Mike McCarthy, but Brian Schottenheimer was in there, was involved with running, maintaining the offense, I would say, and his strong relationship with Dak and, the familiarity of still having Schottenheimer around was thought to be a big reason why they just promoted from within rather than, completely stripping everything down and restarting completely. They decided to keep some relationship, some form of continuity in the organization. So that's really where, the logic stands with bringing in Brian Schottenheimer, to have some sort of continuation there with the team from last year. And although that might be true and it sounds logical, right? One thing fans won't be a fan of, though, is that, last week, one of the things that was brought up was that Brian Schottenheimer was not really being sought after, in a sense, right? He wasn't really getting any attention from other teams wanting to interview him or anything like that. So, no team has wanted to interview Brian Schottenheimer actually since 2013, and that was the Jacksonville Jaguars. So since that time, you're talking about like almost 12 years now, and that was a pretty big red flag for a lot of people. I'm assuming Cowboys fans in this regard, just because you're bringing in this guy, or you're talking about bringing in Brian Schottenheimer, and not that it matters what other teams, other people are doing directly, and how it involves you, but you do get a sense, or you do get a tell of how not good he is as a coordinator or anything like that, but just how much you can base a lot off of, the general public, right? If the general public or most people are going after something or all saying the same thing about something, not that it's absolute fact, but you can get a good sense of what is true and what is not true when a good amount of people are saying the same thing, right? At some point, you got to think, all right, well, if so many people are doing something or not doing something, in this case with Schottenheimer, why is that? What level of truth is there in that? And, that's really kind of where we stand right now with that, the Cowboys and Brian Schottenheimer. And then just overall, I'm not a big fan of it. Not really too excited. Pretty disappointed, honestly. And I guess that's my own fault, right, for thinking that the Cowboys would do anything other than just be content with what they've got going on. I thought a rough year, like a year they're just coming off of with injuries and just really not playing too well, I thought that would be something to kind of kickstart them to really take an initiative this year and try and do something different. I don't know, usually when you perform that bad, like you fail a test or something like that, you'd think that the next test to come around, you'd study harder or you'd do something differently, right? Because obviously what you've been doing has not been working, right? So instead of doing the exact same thing and sticking to your norms, I thought, like anything else probably in life, you would try and do something different, try and shake things up. But the Cowboys, were just acting accordingly, I guess, to what we've been accustomed to. They're a team that punts on 4th and inches when they're down by 3 points on barely the other side of the halfway line, and it's 4th down. They punt each and every time, right? They're not going to give you anything too exciting. They're going to stick to their norms, play it safe, it seems, each and every decision that they make. And yeah, that's where we stand. I'm sure that's the general feeling on this hire by the Cowboys. And in regards to anybody else, I guess for the Cowboys, which is pretty unlike them, to wait until the very end and maybe wait for Kellen Moore, I thought that was understandable to an extent. But, the Cowboys putting everything off so long, I thought that'd be something they'd be willing to do. Considering Kellen Moore and the success he's had in Philadelphia, I thought he was the one that they would go for instead, but instead they settled for Brian Schottenheimer. They acted quickly. Don't really understand why, because again, it's not like a lot of people were interviewing him, so I didn't understand the rush. I credited them because, they were being proactive, but not for a decision like this. And I don't know what needs to happen for this team to kind of realize that they're not as close as they think they are to being a contending team. Because if you make a move like this, I feel like you're coming off of a playoff run, of a divisional run, and you don't want to change too many things. But this is a team that had one of their worst years over the last 5 years, and they think that just upgrading a guy from offensive coordinator who wasn't even calling the plays is going to make a huge difference, right, from 7-10. I don't really see that happening, but I don't want to completely disrespect Brian Schottenheimer. I don't know too much about him and his play calling abilities, but the way it's lined up, all the facts laid out in front of you, it doesn't seem like a risk worth taking, really, at the end of the day. So I don't think this is an improvement on Mike McCarthy at all. And if it's not an improvement, I don't understand why you would even move on from him if this was going to be the case. And what it says about the Cowboys and Jerry Jones is that, to me, that they're willing to settle for just a participation medal, just hanging around the rim like they always like to say, and that they're settling for just selling a false hope, a false dream out to their fans. And I guess that's something that's become a custom over there in Dallas. But instead of taking a gamble, being uncomfortable or taking an uncomfortable decision to try and shake things up, they settled. They went with the safe option. And if not anything, it just ensures that the way things are being run there, no one's going to challenge Jerry, and things are just going to continue to be run as they have been for the good part of, what is it now, the last almost 30 years or something like that. So it's unfortunate, but I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. And now Brian Schottenheimer, he had his introductory press conference today and everything like that. And I'm sure we'll discuss more about it over the next few days. But we are officially now in the Brian Schottenheimer era. So we'll see where this goes for the Dallas Cowboys. But in terms of the show, we're going to move on and start talking about the conference games. The first one up is on the AFC side, the night game, the main event between the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. A lot went into this game. We're going to review everything that went down on the Bills and Chiefs side when we return after this.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. A sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. A sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. A sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and we're discussing one of the games that we saw last night, the AFC Conference Championship game, right? Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills. At the end of the day, when it was all said and done, they had the scenario you'd wish for going up against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, right? They were down 3 points, 3 minutes, 33 seconds left to at least tie the game. A bunch of time. They won the turnover battle again. They were only down 3 points in Kansas City for a chance to go to their first Super Bowl, or I should say Josh Allen's first Super Bowl. And it felt like it was never going to be good enough. Against this level of greatness, unless you seize your moment, unlike the Bills, and how they performed last night. Everything was laid out for them. They had their moment to go out there and take advantage of it. But when you fail to meet that standard, and the Kansas City Chiefs are absolutely that standard, it becomes pretty evident in the details and the fine margins of those big moments in games where Xavier Worthy makes the big catch, or you don't convert on a tush push, or you fail to get the Chiefs off the field with like a minute 40, a minute 35 left. All those things end up mattering in the end. And, there's no play that's ever worthless or doesn't really impact the game at all. When you're talking about greatness like this with the Chiefs, almost everything really comes down to, being significant at the end of the day. And it sounds, hyper focused on, every single little detail, but that's where, you separate teams like the Chiefs, or really just the Chiefs, and every other team that's failed to knock them off of their throne, really, to this point. And now Kansas City is heading to another Super Bowl after defeating the Bills 32-29, and this is Patrick's fourth win over Josh Allen, now heading for a rematch against the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. Josh Allen becomes the only quarterback in NFL history to lose to the same quarterback on 4 different occasions. The limit before this was at 3, and now Josh Allen stands alone with a very unfortunate record against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. And I thought this game, the difference between Kansas City and most is not making all the plays, throughout the game, not working every first down, not getting a bunch of third down conversions, right? It's not about the quantity, and it's not about every single play making it a great one or anything like that, right? Because that's unrealistic. But, in this game, I thought that it wasn't about how many plays you made, but just making the play when it mattered most, right? An excellence across every single member. And you never really talk about anything in regards to the Chiefs on how, that was a questionable call, or, Patrick should have made this read instead of this one, or, these little things you talk about with other teams that might falter at some point in time, where it's a miscommunication, a missed assignment, a questionable fourth down attempt, or anything like that, or settling for a field goal. You never question anything like that with the Chiefs, right? Or at least I don't remember bringing up any decision where I'm like maybe they shouldn't have done that, and this is why. Because it usually never happens, and they just make the most important plays when it matters most. And I thought Patrick made a good point yesterday that it's not just, all the attention goes to Patrick, right? Obviously, but he made it a point of emphasis to say that it's not just about him making all the plays. It's Xavier Worthy stepping up, making big plays. It's Juju making a couple big catches across the middle of the field and converting on third down, or just getting a bunch of yak yardage as well. In a game where Travis Kelce really didn't do Travis Kelce postseason-like things, you had Pacheco contributing, Kareem Hunt contributing, Jalen Watson in the end zone catching only one pass, and it ends up being a touchdown, right? All these things that end up adding up, it's what separates it at the end of the day, right? Everybody, when they're called upon, they make the play, even if it's only 1, 4, 8 plays, 8 catches, or anything like that throughout the game. Everybody knows their role, and they seize their moment. It's not one guy that maybe unfortunately drops a pass or misses an assignment, or a quarterback, throws an interception, things like that. It's pretty remarkable to see, and I picked the Bills to win this game just because I thought it was time for them to, to finally get over the hump, and I thought this was their moment because of everything that they did to get up to here, kind of changing their identity, running a lot of heavy personnel, 6 offensive linemen out there to really build this team to defeat the Chiefs. And I found myself having a hard time thinking of ways to, kind of justify this loss for the Bills, and I did come up with some, but it really felt like a game where nobody did anything tremendously wrong, where you can point to the Lamar turnovers or Mark Andrews not catching a ball or anything like that. I felt for the most part it was a pretty clean game overall for the Bills, considering also that they recovered a fumble in the early portion of the game as well. So I found myself having some trouble, but in this game, it was the controversial fourth down call that was ruled against the Buffalo Bills going for it on fourth down, and the another failed fourth down where Josh Allen just kind of chucks it down the field when Steve Spagnuolo calls a great blitz on fourth down, rattles everything, throws everything off, but still Josh makes a great throw, and unfortunately Dalton Kincaid can't come up with the play. So that was only a couple examples, because it felt like for whatever reason also on this game that the Bills were struggling to convert for whatever reason on fourth downs, right? Like tush pushes and these QB sneaks, these QB runs really looked like it was unnecessarily hard to convert on these. And Josh Allen is as big as you'd want your quarterback to be. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it felt like the calls, the execution of it just wasn't really there, right? Frame-wise and everything like that. You take him, Jalen, not so much Patrick, right? Because he got hurt one time that he did it. But those two guys you'd think are the most overpowered OD kind of quarterbacks that you'd get every single tush push. And nobody does it quite like the Eagles. And I thought the Bills had the personnel to do it. But that was something that I thought was pretty strange. And, honestly, to another point on the failed fourth down, where they didn't, give them the spot and the Chiefs ended up getting the ball after that. Yeah, it might be a little controversial and you had two different refs saying two different things on where to spot the ball. But, at the end of the day, for people to freak out about that decision on the refs and say that it was definitely a first down and things like that. I mean, we don't know how that drive would have ended if it would have kept going. And, like the Bills could have stopped them as well, right? When you talk about calls like that and you consider everything, how it goes into that play and how it plays into it, right? It's not like it's just a foregone conclusion that you turn the ball over and the Chiefs are going to score, right? You're allowed to stop them, right? It's not just like, oh, you turn it over, now they're just going to go down and score, right? So there's always that part of it that I think, just too many people ignore. But of course it makes it easier, obviously, but it doesn't just make it a foregone conclusion that anything else is going to turn out the way it did in that game. It just happened to go that way. So it was a big moment, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't, again, just determine the entirety of the game. Because you look at the start of this game as well, and you could easily say that Josh, dodged a bunch of bullets at the start, right? He could have had a couple interceptions. He dropped the ball on a couple times. He was fortunate not to really turn the ball over at all, but the Chiefs could point to all those moments and say, well, we could have intercepted it here. We could have recovered another fumble here. It's not just about, the ref and that one play, right? Because you could pull out a bunch of other things in favor of the Chiefs, or in favor of the Bills, and how, the ball fortunately rolled their way. So, I think that's a two-way street that you could go down, right? When you're talking about hypotheticals that way with the refs or turnovers or things like that. But, towards the end of the game, when Kansas City stopped them and scored to take the lead 22-29, again, like the Bills did an awesome job to answer that and make it 29-29 with a touchdown of Curtis Samuel. So, they were in the game, right? They stopped them, but they were still in this game competing and everything like that. They did an even better job of stopping Kansas City after they made it 29-29 to hold them to only a field goal. So I really thought it was Josh's moment at that time when, there was 3 minutes and 33 seconds left, especially after converting on that 2nd and 11, right? You get behind the chains, but he has a great run, and you're thinking, or at least I'm thinking, like, wow, like that was a great conversion, that was a great decision. He's feeling it right now. He's getting into that flow sort of state, right, in the game where just everything is just going, right? You're just acting on instinct. You're not even thinking about what you're doing. I thought that's what we were starting to see, but after 2 incomplete throws and a completion to Amari Cooper, it turned to 4th and 5, and, the legendary Hall of Famer Steve Spagnuolo calls the perfect blitz, and he throws everything off for the Bills, right? In that moment, for Steve Spagnuolo to call the exact perfect play to stop, that sort of flow state that it looked like Josh Allen was entering and completely flipped the momentum at that point in the game, I thought was genius and a perfect call at the end of the day again. And I say that, but the throw by Josh was still so good, and I thought Dalton Kincaid, fair or unfair, I thought he probably should have caught that. It's not to the level of Mark Andrews to use as a comparison, right? But like it was right there. It was like right like in his forearms basically, right? And I know it was probably, he was probably like discombobulated, kind of stopping and going back and tracking the ball, but I don't know. It felt like it was right there for him. And he said he felt, awful about it, obviously, after that. It was a pretty painful moment. So it's, it's those margins, right? What separates that catch and the throw, the blitz call and everything like that. It's the victories are found in the fine details for this team, for the Chiefs. And where the Bills, failed to execute on maybe realigning the protection or failing that fourth down, not getting that catch, right? That 50-50 catch with Xavier Worthy that I mentioned before. The Chiefs never failed to execute on those opportunities, right? And I did feel bad for Josh because, like I don't know what else you could do. Like, physically, managing the game and anything like that, I don't know really much what else he can do. And it always feels like you're not taking the pressure off of him, like he's not to blame for any mistakes, but it always feels like it's something else, right? Like maybe the defense, with the 13 seconds, and then yesterday as well. Or it might be like a drop or a missed field goal, right? You always feel for Josh. And, especially yesterday, he looked really defeated, more so than, any other game I've seen. So I did feel bad for the Bills and Josh in that respect, but when you take it onto perspective again, and I'll use this to close it out, right? Like, the Bills won the turnover battle again. They shut down Travis Kelce for the most part. But Kansas City, has guys that understand that they must make a play when called upon, right? You never leave anything to chance. You never question their level of preparedness or play calling or execution. It's never a moment where you question Andy Reid or this defensive play call or offensively what they're trying to do. And that sort of level of preparedness, again, execution and things like that is just next level, obviously. And a lot of these teams failed to reach that mark, quite honestly. So it was also that, and the Bills defense, giving up 30 points to this Chiefs team that hadn't scored 30 points all season long is another thing that you could point to. But yeah, it's tough at the end of the day. The Chiefs win by the final, dare I say, much more talented team. Is that crazy to say? In the Eagles? I don't think it's that crazy, but we'll do a lot more comparison on those two teams as we get closer to the Super Bowl. But for right now, mentioning the Eagles, we got to get to their game and their complete domination of the Washington Commanders. It was close for a little bit in that first half and a little bit of the third quarter, but the Eagles end up running away with it, scoring 55 points and punching their ticket to another Super Bowl. So we're going to dissect that game when we return after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action now and looking over the second conference game that happened yesterday. The first game, actually, yesterday was the Eagles and Washington. And with this game, the level of familiarity you have with your opponent, right, playing them 3 times already this year, once in Philly, once in Washington, right, they've split it so far, and this was the rubber match back at Lincoln Financial Stadium. There was a lot that you could have picked out from this game, right, and what could have been the determining factor, but I thought the first 2 drives for each team set up the attitude and kind of set the tone for each of these teams in this game, right? Where Washington had a great drive going to start the game, converting 2 fourth downs already, having a great drive that was just continually being extended to start this game. And if you're Philly, or at least I, in my living room watching this game, I'm thinking like, wow, like they're clicking right now. Like they're having a very impressive first drive to this game, and after converting 2 fourth downs, they faced another 4th down, 4th and 3 at Philadelphia's 16-yard line, and they decided to kick a field goal this time, which was kind of weird, right? You heard Tom Brady even on the call saying like they already converted twice. What's doing it one more time? And if not, the Eagles fought the previous 2 times, but they settled for a field goal, and the Eagles, get the ball. They respond, and in one play, it's just a quick throw to Saquon, and it's 60 yards to the house in like 15 seconds. And now they're leading on their first possession on their only drive of the game so far. Saquon changes the game, changes the momentum right away in a second, and the Eagles now lead 7-3. And yeah, then you see Philly, with their drive and everything like that, and then Washington's second drive ended with their first turnover of the game after Daimi Brown fumbled, and that was only the first one, right? Because that was a pretty big fumble for them to, to give up a play like that, and then you come back your second drive and you fumble. It's very demoralizing. Obviously, it's very like whoa, like the Commanders gotta settle down here a little bit because they just gave up that huge play, and now the Eagles got the ball right back in less than 30 seconds already. So like I mentioned, that was only their first turnover. They ended the day with 4 of them, and all of them ended with a touchdown by the Philadelphia Eagles. 27 points total would have been their score without these touchdowns, potentially, right? I say potentially just because you don't know, again, how the game would have shifted if they don't score these touchdowns, but you take away 4 touchdowns from 55 points, and that's a pretty big difference, obviously. So a lot of people, including myself, are going to point to the turnovers, right, being the main factor as to how the Commanders, just kind of fell apart in this game. But, the next takeaway that I wanted to bring up was that Saquon only carried the ball 15 times. Still impactful, he still scored 3 times for crying out loud, and had I think over 100 yards if I'm not mistaken anyway. But I thought Jalen Hurts again shut a lot of people up with 246 passing yards, 4 total touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns for him as well, and a quarterback rating of 110. And there was a couple of impressive throws in man coverage on Marshawn Lattimore. A.J. Brown just running a go route. A.J. Brown beating Marshawn and Jalen dropping it in the bucket perfectly for him. That was a huge play on 4th and 5, I believe. Also, the touchdown throw to A.J. Brown looks easier than it actually was. So for Jalen to put it in a good spot was huge. And again, he had a nice connection with Dallas Goedert going, and a couple throws in zone coverage, a couple just man beaters on one-on-one routes were very impressive. And I thought yesterday was Jalen's best game of the postseason so far. And he also had a nice throw to Devontae Smith on the sideline as well. And again, all this says to me about Jalen, and for anybody doubting him, and I'd admit that I had some doubts going into this on Jalen as well, but really my overarching thought on Jalen was that just because they don't do it doesn't mean that Jalen can't do it, right? It doesn't mean that he's incapable of finding the open guys, taking advantage of having 2 great wide receivers to his use on this off run. Jalen is very capable of doing that. It's just not how they play. So I think a lot of people just kind of overblow it to an extent. But, Jalen, I'm sure, has no problem in showing his skill set like he did yesterday. So that was very impressive. And Philadelphia's 55 points, like I mentioned a little bit ago, were the most points scored ever in a conference title game. They scored 8 touchdowns and 7 were on the ground. They were rushing. And this was the first game that I thought Washington was sort of exposed for their bad run defense, and also just exposed as the underdog, I guess you could say, right? The team that not a lot of people expected to be here, a team that relied on playing clean football and sticking to to their game plan, right? Not venturing too far off of it and taking calculated risks on fourth down, right? They kind of went away with that in this game, right? Whether it be not going for it to start the game and settling for a field goal right away, or it's all those turnovers that they had. And, at that point, right, you're really putting yourself in a very difficult spot, because even if they did play perfect, no turnovers, and they converted like all but maybe 2 fourth downs or something like that, it still was going to be extremely difficult for them to win this game. But at least they gave themselves a chance, and they did give themselves a chance when it was 12-20 at one point, but then they fumbled again, and you're just like come on, like you can't just keep like selling the game like this. This is crazy. And then they almost held them to a field goal when it was 12-20, but then their rookie cornerback, Mike Sanders, hit Saquon out of bounds too late, and then the flags come in. So when you make a big stop like that, and then you just give them another first down on a play that was, rightly called, it's not like it was a bad call, you're just like really holding yourself back from salvaging any sort of, relief from the first half. And then they end up scoring on that drive. It was a tush-push touchdown, if I'm not mistaken, to Jalen Hurts. And, at that point, going into halftime, you're thinking, like that was rough. Like, that was really, really rough. Because the Commanders played, like I said, like the 6th seed. They played like they had nothing to lose, and the occasion felt like too big for them, right? Where the Eagles were hitting on everything that they set out to, right? They were forcing fumbles. They were making big plays. They were playing pretty good man coverage defense for the most part, other than maybe that Terry touchdown. They were pretty locked down for the most part, and they sacked Jaden Daniels on 3 occasions. That's 3 more times than he, I think, was even sacked at all this postseason, or maybe he was sacked only once going into this game. But still, this Eagles defense was very impressive on the day. Zach Bond continuing to show why he was an all-pro this year with a forced fumble, recovering a fumble as well. And not only him, but guys like Oren Burks, who maybe a couple of you don't know who that is, but stepping in for Nakobe Dean, right, from the special teams, right, being promoted to a starting role and making a play like that is obviously massive. And Quinyon Mitchell getting his first interception of his career, or of his postseason career, that was another big play. And Jalen Carter disrupting everything. Jordan Davis getting a sack. Nolan Smith as well. A lot of their players just made more plays really in this game, more than the Commanders players. And it was unfortunate because of that reality, but again, because the Commanders shot themselves in the foot pretty good for a good part of this game. So overall, you saw the difference in talent from Philadelphia, and especially when you're just giving them freebies like that, it's almost impossible for the Commanders to have won that game. And it was, again, the only time I thought Washington really looked like a team that maybe you didn't expect to be there. They were exceeding expectations, but unfortunately yesterday for them, that came to an end. And, with Jaden Daniels, I really didn't mention him, but he put up a good fight. I thought he was really their only bright spot in terms of offense and creating something significant and meaningful, like a significant threat to the Eagles. That it all came from Jaden Daniels. So I thought he played pretty well. But all their weak points showed as well in this game, like their offensive line. the lack of weapons. Also, you could say, right, Terry went through a pretty decent cold stretch there where he caught the touchdown, but then after that, they weren't really getting him the ball as much as I'm sure they would have liked to. The Eagles kind of got it into gear in terms of covering him, so they kind of struggled to get to him. That's why, they need some more weapons. The run game went missing with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. Their defensive line struggled without Deron Payne, so I would like to see them, just kind of not revamp this team, but just get it a bit more, sturdier, get it a bit more support this offseason, and get guys to fill, those second wave of player sort of roles where you have more defensive linemen to rotate in, or you have another great wide receiver like T. Higgins or something like that in free agency, right? I think they need that to take that next step. And they're going to be competitive next year, no doubt, but I just feel like they definitely need to improve upon this, right? Not just settle like we got Jaden Daniels and that's it, right? We're just going to win games, right? They got to help them out as much as possible. And if they do that, the sky's the limit for this team, obviously. And they got one of the good ones, I truly believe, in Jaden. So I'm excited to see where they go, especially this offseason, and how active they were last offseason. But lastly here for Philadelphia, they get their 15th win in their last 16 games and head to the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs in a rematch in better form and arguably more talented than their last Super Bowl appearance against Kansas City, where they lost, unfortunately for them, but it was very, very close. So now they're hoping that with the addition of Saquon, right, they could obviously have enough to get over this hump and stop the Chiefs from three-peating. But that is still a couple weeks away, and for the remainder of this show, we're going to go into a couple more segments. One on the Pittsburgh Steelers and their quarterback situation. Their owner spoke a little bit today on, the offseason and that quarterback position, and then we're going to get to some coaching updates here towards the end of the show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping back into the action here and talking about something that we didn't get to last week, I came to realize was the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a very significant offseason is in store for them this year, already starting with their participation at the Shrine Bowl. They're very big on the Senior Bowl as well coming up and things like that. They're very much already starting to get in the gear of scouting and, off-season and things like that. They're already starting that whole process. And, Pittsburgh came into this postseason as well with questions at the quarterback position, and they were hoping to get a bit more clarity on that this season. But I'd say we still have as many questions as we did at the start, if not more now, that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are free agents now. And it feels like we're inching closer to the end of their one-year deals in March, right? They are still under contract until free agency starts, obviously. And based on the comments today from their owner, Art Rooney, and just my overall sense on this, it feels like the state of the Steelers at the quarterback position is very much going to be either Russ or Justin Fields, not Russ and Justin Fields, one or the other, based on, I'm going to see if I can find it here on X. It feels like it's going to be one or the other there at the quarterback position. According to what Art Rooney said today, he talked on a bunch of different things, and It feels like it's going to be one or the other. And what Art Rooney actually said on the quarterbacks and things like that in regards to Justin Fields and things like that, he said that he sees that Justin Fields wants to get better, and he's intrigued by the opportunity to keep working with Justin Fields, and also the idea of keeping both of them is something that he said was a priority, to keep working with one of the two, going forward. But it feels like there was an underlying tone there a little bit. And this is coming after last week where on the Pat McAfee show, Russell Wilson was on there and they were talking about his future and the contract talks really at this point and how early it still is. But Russell said on the Pat McAfee show on his contract that, yes, we have been starting to talk a little bit, but we've had our meetings and everything else just getting into it. So I think that it's an exciting time to be a Pittsburgh Steeler and the opportunity of what we can do. So the real significant part of that was that they have started to talk a little bit in terms of what a contract could potentially be and things like that. But you get that, and then this week you get Art Rooney sort of hinting to the fact that it's only going to be one of them. And, he talked pretty highly of Justin Fields as well. And, in one quote that he had today on the development of Justin Fields was that he said, obviously, we had a winning record. He handled the situation, I think, as a young quarterback who wants to come in and learn and grow. And I think he did grow. And I think he does have that mindset that he wants to get better. So I think that, that makes you feel like you want to potentially work with him again in the future. So advertising Justin Fields and advertising Russell Wilson, at least from Russ's point of view, has been going in a pretty positive direction right now for the Steelers. And also you had before Mike Tomlin mentioning how he saw Justin Fields perform like a starting quarterback at this point, during this last season. He said that he felt that Justin showed that he could be a starter in this league, and he did get the first crack at starting, at the end of the day, and he went 4-2 before Pittsburgh went to Russell Wilson. So there was a ton of excitement around Justin, and there really wasn't like a huge cry for the Steelers to bench Justin at that point in time. Yes, it was a little bit rough, and yes, you did have your questions with the mishandling of snaps, and the Raiders game wasn't particularly great either, but they did win. So, there was some bumps and bruises in, again, the first year of this experience. But even still, it wasn't like a lot of people were screaming to get Justin Fields out of there. Again, it was just a hunch decision by Mike Tomlin that did end up turning out pretty well at the start because Russ won his first 6 of 7 games. But then after that, not just on Russell Wilson, but the entire team, they went on that 5-game losing streak. And now, because Russ is the quarterback, right, obviously, a lot of the attention goes to him, on the offensive side of the ball and the falling off the cliff that they had. That there are some questions with Russ, and, you always bring up the lack of mobility and the Steelers' offense being so predictable and things like that. A lot of that, unfortunately, falls to Russ. So, I guess the factors to consider here with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields is, first, and financially, how much are the Steelers willing to give Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields as well, or one or the other, right? You also have to consider that Justin Fields has probably more of an outside interest in his services rather than Russell Wilson. So that's something else you have to consider, right? If you're the Steelers and you offer him this amount of money, and this other team offers him a lot more money and probably guarantees him to be their starter, how does that impact, your game plan going forward if Art Rooney, with what he said, and we're assuming, obviously, right, with his comments that he wants to keep Justin Fields potentially over Russell Wilson, but they're not able to do that, right? They gotta file through the outside factors as well, especially with Justin Fields having a much improved year from what we saw from him in Chicago. So that's something that they have to consider. You also have to consider the fact that Russ might be taking less money if he's open to doing that. And if he does come back on a very team-friendly deal, maybe say with Justin Fields as well, then is he open to the possibility that this could be an actual quarterback competition, not just the fact that he's named the starter, regardless of anything, right? Is this actually going to be a quarterback competition, and is that something that Russell Wilson would be open to, right? Or is he going to be, ill-willed about the idea that he was a starter and now going into next year he's going to have to compete for his spot? That could be something that might not line up as well, so you got to keep an eye on that. And there was also those reports that Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith really weren't too much on the same page, and that actually Arthur Smith preferred Justin Fields as the quarterback. And I don't think that's entirely so black and white like that, but it just, it is something else to consider potentially, right? If, enough people say it, how long before you start thinking that's true? And it felt like there was some level of truth to that, but again, we're not going to just speculate that it is the absolute truth, but it is something to kind of consider when you're making this decision. And honestly, if they can work out the financials and things like that, I could definitely see the Steelers bringing both of them back potentially. If the financial side is very much in their favor, I think if Russ takes a pretty cheap and friendly deal, almost to like the level they did this year, the Steelers would have no problem in bringing both of them back. But the way that, again, Art Rooney was talking today in his, end of the year statements to the media, he mentioned how he would like both of his quarterbacks or his quarterback room next year to have a lot of the same characteristics, right? Pocket presence. They have to be able to be mobile and run the ball and things like that, have a strong arm and other things like that describe quarterbacks. That was something that he said he would like to see from his quarterback room next year. So whether he considers Russ in that sort of, category, or if he considers, some draft prospect to fit that as much as maybe Justin Fields as well. There's a lot of things to consider here with the Steelers and the quarterback position. And, in that sense, what sort of quarterback are you looking for in the draft also, right? You can say you want someone like that, but does that mean like a Quinn Ewers, or do you try and go for Jalen Milroe potentially? He has a lot of characteristics similar to Justin Fields. So is that something that you would even explore, or like a Jackson Dart from Ole Miss? I think that would probably be their best option, in my opinion, right? Maybe he's there till the third round, and you can, pick him at that point. But I think using a second-round pick, definitely not a first-round pick on a quarterback, is still a little bit early, especially for a draft class that's definitely not as high on the quarterbacks as it was yesterday. So you don't want another, no offense, another Kenny Pickett situation where you just draft one for the sake of drafting one and it doesn't work out. So it feels like the Steelers and their owner, Art Rooney, are very adamant that a lot of things, need fixing, need, improvement, right? Obviously, but the biggest thing that this year, right? They can't just be coasting in this weird middle ground where, yes, maybe a couple games it looks like they have their guy, then it just plummets the next 4 games, and then they go to the other guy, and it's the same thing. You can't keep having these waves of up and down, because for the most part, usually when they hit their worst form, that downslide is around the playoffs, and they go home in the first round. So I'd like to, if you ask me personally, I would like to see Justin Fields get the opportunity, because you still don't really know what you have there with him because you decided to go to Russ. And I think what you saw from Russ is as good as advertised as what you're going to get for him going forward. Whereas with Justin, I still think there's some things there that you could potentially unlock and just tighten up a little bit more. Because he's still so young, I think he's still only like 25 or 26, you can still work with him to that extent. And get him to still incline, still progress at this point in his career. It's not like he's all set and done like potentially Russ is. So, I'd like to see him go with Justin. I feel like he has really not done anything to lose that opportunity. So that's what I would like to see them do. And then explore your options at a quarterback, potentially in the third round, because I'm also not a fan of the free agent options out there, but that's just me. But we'll see. I mean, the Steelers are very much in the thick of things right now. They're not just looking at quarterback, obviously. They're doing their due diligence at a bunch of different spots. So we'll see where it goes from here with the Steelers. But in terms of the show, one more segment to get to. Just a quick update on a bunch of hires in the coaching realm in the NFL, from Robert Saleh, Joe Brady, Kellen Moore, all these guys, and where they could potentially be playing, or not playing, coaching next season in 2025. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. And just a quick go around here with some more head coaching news, or coordinator news really, in this segment, on some of the more well-known names out there that have found new homes. And, we're going to start off today with the news that we had more news around the coaching world in regards to some of the guys like Joe Brady, Robert Saleh, Kellen Moore is another big one, and Clint Kubiak, also another one. That was one of my personal favorites. He also found a new home already as well. So starting off with Joe Brady, relationship, starting off with the whole conference championship and things like that. Joe Brady with the Buffalo Bills being their offensive coordinator, actually before the start of their game this past Saturday, he actually told the Saints that he was opting to stay with the Buffalo Bills going, into the foreseeable future. He took his name out of the running for their potential head coaching opportunity and just said, basically, like, no thanks, that he is going to be staying with the Buffalo Bills. And, I don't know how much longer he's going to stay with them. I actually don't know how long his contract runs, but he was supposed to have a second interview this week with the Saints, and with the Saints being the only team remaining without a head coach, right, I thought that could have been a perfect place for Joe Brady to go and potentially be hired. But after, the news from Dallas and them hiring Brian Schottenheimer, the Saints still remained with Joe Brady and a couple other candidates out there. I thought Joe potentially could have been there as an ideal candidate, but from the news and everything like that, Joe Brady is opting to stay in Buffalo, and I think more so now that they ended up losing this game. I'm sure a lot of those guys, after they get over the pain of losing, obviously, because it was a brutal one, I'm sure a lot of those guys are going to be more amped up than ever to come back and feel like they have unfinished business, basically. I feel like a bunch of them, if not the entire organization, is going to feel like that. So it doesn't really surprise me if I put it like that, but I was really looking forward to seeing Joe Brady as a head coach, because he's had a pretty fast rise after being promoted halfway through last season to offensive coordinator. And it kind of reminds me of Ben Johnson in a way that he's being pretty selective with these opportunities, right? Because usually when you get an opportunity like this, you usually jump on it, right, to be a head coach in the NFL. But he's really being selective about it, and he feels like he has a good thing going, certainly in Buffalo. So the fact that he's not being rushed and probably that there are going to be more opportunities out there reminds me of Ben Johnson a little bit last offseason. But Joe Brady is actually not going to go anywhere, unlike Robert Saleh, who, the announcement was made last Friday from San Francisco that they had come to terms with their former defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, to become their defensive coordinator once again. Robert Saleh was actually last there from 2017 to 2020. He then took the opportunity to go coach the New York Jets as their head coach, and he was just recently fired this season, halfway through. He joined the Packers for a little bit there for the ending part of the season, but now, going into this offseason now, he had a lot of interest really from the Jaguars. He also interviewed with the Cowboys, but nothing really came to terms or nothing really matured from that point. He just had the interviews and nothing really developed from there. And on that, I started hearing more rumors on the 49ers being interested once again, especially after they parted ways with their defensive coordinator this year, Nick Sorensen, in one of, or not his first opportunity of being a defensive coordinator. Let's just say it didn't go as dominant in a way as you would have expected for this 49ers defense. So you started hearing more rumors about Robert Saleh and going back to the 49ers, but they made it official last Friday, and now Robert Saleh will be there once again. And, despite the record with the Jets and how it was a pretty tumultuous time all in all, defensively, you could confidently say that over Robert Saleh's time there, that the defense was the most consistent and, quite frankly, the best part of that team. So the fact that he's going back and just being a coordinator, right, just solely focusing on defense, I think is an awesome opportunity. And he'll take over a very familiar group with Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Trevarius Ward, all still there. And, he had a lot of success with this group, and I think this is something that the 49ers needed, with someone that's very familiar to them, someone that's experienced now with head coaching and as a coordinator. They made it to a Super Bowl in 2019 with him, unfortunately. With the background, I guess I would say, just all in all, to come in and kind of settle things down there for a defense that I thought really underperformed to the level of talent that they have. So I'm excited for that. Usually for reunions like this, I'm not too big of a fan, but I think Robert Saleh going back is going to do that 49ers defense a lot of good rather than just the same old, same old. I think that it's going to be a great move. And then, staying in the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks also announced that they are hiring a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak. He will be their new offensive coordinator after they fired their former coordinator, Ryan Grubb, after only 1 year. And one reason for that, you could say, was that Mike Macdonald, the new young head coach for the Seahawks this past season, who did a phenomenal job coming over from Baltimore, he said that he wanted to run the ball more efficiently this year. The Seahawks ranked 28th in the running portion of the stats, so that's obviously not good at all. So he kind of laid that out there, and you could take it as a potential reason why they decided to move on from Ryan Grubb, despite the fact that Jackson Smith and Jigba had a breakout season and that he played as their best receiver. They said that they wanted to run the ball basically a lot better. And Clint Kubiak, I thought that was doing very well in that department when it came to the start of the season, right? They had big games against the Panthers. Again, all in all, knowing what we know about the Panthers, but also against the Cowboys, pummeling them in Dallas, of all places, as well, and having a huge offensive performance as well, and almost beating the Eagles right after that. It was a good start that was very was very encouraging, I think, for Clint Kubiak. And then the injuries started happening. Derek Carr went down, and Chris Olave struggled with injuries as well. I thought that really derailed their season. Not that it was just on Clint Kubiak, right? But the injuries really made it hard for the entire team. So Clint Kubiak having this opportunity to coach some very talented players like Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba all in all, I think is going to be a great opportunity for them to, I won't say take a risk or anything like that, because I think Clint should have definitely been given an opportunity, but to fire your coordinator after 1 year, after only like one portion of the offense wasn't up to par, is a little bit, you could say risky, but I like that they went with Clint Kubiak. I think he's going to do great things there. So they decided to go in this direction. And then lastly, what I will mention is in relation to what we saw yesterday, NFL media reported that the New Orleans Saints are likely going to fly out today to Philadelphia to conduct a in-person interview with Kellen Moore for their head coaching opportunity. And they're allowed to do that during this off week between, the Pro Bowl and the players actually reporting for all the media activities they do in the lead up to the Super Bowl. This week, they're actually not doing much. So the Seahawks, according to NFL media, were actually going to go fly out there and have an in-person interview with Kellen Moore, which I think says a whole lot about who they want to be their head coach next season, right? Because Mike McCarthy is also set to have another interview with them this week, and the Saints did request an interview with Cliff Kingsbury, but he refused because he wanted to focus on Washington, at least until the season was over. So he played up until yesterday, so it'll be interesting to see how maybe their interest shifts if Cliff Kingsbury takes that interview. But I think for right now, Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore seem to be the favorites for this job. And based on the Saints flying themselves all the way to Philadelphia and then having Mike McCarthy come to them, I think we could tell who they'd ideally want to be their offensive coordinator in 2025. And I think that it would be a great move. The longer it goes, the longer we're without a decision, because, Kellen Moore's playing the Super Bowl. I think the longer we push it to the Super Bowl and we stay in this state of not knowing who the Saints are going to hire, I think that pushes it more in favor of Kellen Moore. Because if they want to hire Mike McCarthy and they think he's the guy, they don't have to wait, obviously, because Kellen's not going to be able to take a job until after the Super Bowl. So, they have that. So that is something else to kind of keep an eye on if you're a Saints fan, or if you're just wondering why the Saints haven't hired anybody. It's because they're probably leaning towards Kellen Moore if they don't announce it before the Super Bowl. So I think whichever one of these guys gets it, personally, I think it should be Kellen Moore. I think it just is more encouraging after the season he had compared to the season the Cowboys had, unfortunately. So that would leave it in an interesting spot, though, because if Kellen gets that spot, what becomes of Mike McCarthy? Is he going to go to the Eagles or something and kind of do a switch there? That would be crazy to see Mike McCarthy in Philadelphia after coaching the Cowboys. But I guess it's not too weird with Kellen Moore kind of doing the same thing, but he went over to Los Angeles before that. But without diving into all the hypotheticals, that is something that just crossed my mind. But we'll see. I mean, the Saints are the only team without a head coach as of right now, so we'll see how long they go without making that decision. But for right now, that is going to do it for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast. And please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. You can check out more of the Chip Shot Football Podcast on the Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube, where you can catch more YouTube shorts, more coverage just around the NFL, really in general, with breaking news, reviews, previews, and just discussion points around this league with myself, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. And As a final reminder, I'll be joining you guys again tomorrow at the same time at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for another live show. So make sure to come back tomorrow and join me for another episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.